The sun was setting over the sleepy village of Belmese, casting long, jagged shadows across the dusty streets. It was August 1971, a day like any other. Or so Maria thought. She was in her kitchen, the heart of her home. The smell of wood smoke filled the air. She moved toward the stove. But then she stopped. Her breath caught in her throat. There, on the pink-tiled floor, was something that shouldn't be there. A stain. At first, she thought it was just grease, or perhaps some spilled coffee. She leaned down, squinting in the dim light, but the closer she got, the more her blood ran cold. This was no spill. It was a shape, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, a face. A human face was staring up at her from the very floor she walked on every single day. It wasn't painted. It wasn't drawn. It was emerging, like a ghost rising through the stone. Maria felt a chill, even in the summer heat. She grabbed a cloth. She scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed. Her hands shook, but the face didn't move. It didn't fade. It just watched. Those eyes, they weren't empty. They were filled with a deep, ancient sadness. Maria screamed for her husband. Juan ran in, confused, annoyed, until he saw it. He stood frozen. What is this? Silence. The next day, the village was buzzing. Neighbors crowded into the small kitchen. They whispered. They pointed. Some crossed themselves in fear. Others laughed, calling it a trick of the light. But the laughter didn't last long. Juan took a pickaxe. He was a hard man, a practical man. He didn't believe in ghosts. He swung the axe. Smash, smash. He destroyed the tile. He ripped up the concrete. He threw the debris away. He laid down fresh, clean, gray cement. There, he said. It's gone. He was wrong. 1 week later, Maria walked into the kitchen at dawn. The air felt heavy, like a weight on her chest. She looked at the new floor. Her heart skipped a beat. The face, it was back, but it wasn't the same. This one was different, older, more pained. And it wasn't alone. Small, faint shapes began to form around it, like a crowd, gathering in the dark. The concrete was changing. It was breathing. It was marking them. The news spread like a wildfire. Journalists, scientists, curiosity seekers, they all came to the house in Belmese. They asked questions. They took photos. Is it a hoax? Is it a miracle? Or is it a warning? The house was no longer a home. It was a sensation, but for Maria, it was a nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that face, those hollow eyes, looking into her soul. What lay beneath the floor? What secrets were buried in the dirt? The village elders began to remember old stories, stories of blood and war, stories of the ground that never forgets. They decided to dig deeper. They didn't know that some things are better left buried. The digging began. The dirt flew, and then the shovel hit something hard, something that wasn't stone. A hollow sound echoed through the kitchen. The faces on the floor seemed to glow. They were waiting. They were hungry. The investigation was about to uncover the darkest secret of Belmese, a secret that would change everything, because the faces weren't just stains. They were a map leading straight to the dead. Finger bones, tangled together like a knot of wood. The house was built on a cemetery, an ancient graveyard from the 17th century. The village elders whispered. Stories of a church that once stood there. Stories of a prison. Stories of executions. The ground was soaked in blood, and the concrete was thirsty. Move them, the mayor ordered. Take them to the cemetery. Give them a proper burial. They cleared the pit. They took every bone, every fragment, every tooth. They filled the hole with clean dirt. They poured a fresh layer of thick, heavy, expensive cement. Surely, now the souls would rest. Surely, the kitchen would be a kitchen again. Maria prayed. Juan cleaned his tools. The house was silent for 3 days. There was peace. But on the fourth night, the temperature dropped. Maria woke up at 3 a.m., the witching hour. She felt a pulling, a tugging in her gut. She walked to the kitchen, her bare feet cold on the tiles. She didn't want to look. She tried not to look, but her eyes, they moved on their own. She looked down. She screamed. The faces were back. But they weren't just faces anymore. They were transforming. One face had a wide, gaping hole for a mouth, as if it were screaming in eternal silence. Another had tears, wet, glistening streaks of moisture running down the concrete. And there was a new one, a small face, with wide, innocent eyes. A child who had been buried and forgotten. The investigators were stunned. The bones were gone. The dirt was new. The cement was fresh. There was no scientific explanation. No chemicals. No paint. The faces were telepathic. They appeared when Maria was home. They faded when she left. Was she the bridge? Was her mind the camera? And the floor of the film? They decided to do an experiment. A brutal, cold experiment. They cleared the room. They placed microphones on the walls. They sealed the doors with wax and lead. No one could enter. No one could leave. They left the house. And they waited. They listened through the speakers. At first, static, then a thump, then a whisper. "I want to leave." A voice hissed through the machine. "It hurts. It's dark." The scientists looked at each other, faces pale, hearts racing. Who was talking? The dead or the house itself? They broke the seal. They rushed inside. And what they saw changed their lives forever. The floor wasn't just covered in faces. It was a map of agony. Dozens of shapes, twisting, turning, fighting to get out of the stone. The faces were moving while they watched. The nightmare was no longer a village secret. It was a global mystery. But for the Pereira family, it was a trap. They were living inside a ghost story. And the ending was nowhere in sight, because once you see the faces, they never ever stop looking back at you. They appeared when Maria was home. They faded when she left. Was she the bridge? Was her mind the camera? And the floor of the film? They decided to do an experiment. A brutal, cold experiment. They cleared the room. They placed microphones on the walls. They sealed the doors with wax and lead. No one could enter. No one could leave. They left the house. And they waited. They listened through the speakers. At first, static, then a thump, then a whisper. "I want to leave." A voice hissed through the machine. "It hurts. It's dark." The scientists looked at each other, faces pale, hearts racing. Who was talking? The dead or the house itself? They broke the seal. They rushed inside. And what they saw changed their lives forever. The floor wasn't just covered in faces. It was a map of agony. Dozens of shapes, twisting, turning, fighting to get out of the stone. The faces were moving while they watched. The nightmare was no longer a village secret. It was a global mystery. But for the Pereira family, it was a trap. They were living inside a ghost story. And the ending was nowhere in sight, because once you see the faces, they never ever stop looking back at you. The house in Belmez was no longer a home. It was a laboratory, a prison for the living, and a playground for the dead. The world was watching. TV crews from the USA, from London, from Tokyo. They brought cameras. They brought infrared lights. They brought doubt. But the house, it had a way of crushing doubt. It had a way of turning skeptics into believers. The scientists decided. On a final, ultimate test, they cleared the kitchen. They scrubbed the floor with acid. They wanted to see if the faces were just oil, or lead, or silver. The acid hissed. The smoke rose. The floor was stripped bare. Nothing but gray, cold, sterile concrete. Then, they did the unthinkable. They laid down a massive sheet of glass. They sealed the edges with wax. They signed their names on the seal. No one could touch the floor. Not Maria. Not Juan, not a single soul. They locked the door. They waited. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The house was silent. The microphones picked up nothing but the wind, howling through the cracks. The scientists smiled. It was a hoax, they whispered. A clever trick. On the 30th day, they broke the seal. They lifted the glass. The room went cold. The air felt like ice. The floor wasn't empty. It was alive, under the glass, protected from the world. A new face had formed, but it wasn't like the others. It was sharp, detailed. You could see the wrinkles in the forehead. You could see the stare in the eyes. And it wasn't just on the floor anymore. The investigators turned around. They gasped. The faces were on the walls. They were climbing, small, ghostly shapes, moving up the plaster, like a slow-motion nightmare. A woman, her head tilted back, screaming. A man, his face twisted in rage. They were everywhere. The kitchen had become a gallery of the damned. The scientists checked the wax. It wasn't broken. They checked the glass. It was perfect. There was no paint, no silver, no trickery. How? One scientist asked. His voice was shaking. He looked at Maria. She was standing in the doorway. She looked tired, older. Her eyes were sunken. And then, someone noticed something terrifying. When Maria was angry, the faces on the wall looked angry. When Maria was sad, the faces seemed to weep. A new theory was born, thoughtography. The idea was simple, but horrifying. The faces weren't just ghosts. They were a projection. Maria's mind was the projector, and the house was the screen. Her pain, her memories, her subconscious were being burned into the concrete. The dead were using her as a medium. They were using her energy to manifest, to show the world their agony. But if the faces came from Maria, what would happen when Maria was gone? The investigators tried to talk to the faces. They used a tape recorder. They sat in the dark, the red light of the recorder blinking like a heartbeat. Clip, clip, clip. Who are you? They whispered. The tape hissed. They played it back. Through the static, a voice emerged. It wasn't human. It was deep, guttural, like stones grinding together. I am still here. The researchers bolted for the door. They left their equipment. They left their notes. They left the house because they realized you don't study the faces of Belmeds. The faces, they study you. They watch your fear. They feed on your heart, and they'd never close their eyes. The mystery was deepening. The horror was growing. And Maria, she was trapped in the center of it all, waiting for the day the faces would finally let her go, or the day she would become one of them. Decades passed, but the house in Belmez did not grow quiet. It grew hungry. Maria was no longer the young woman who first scrubbed the floor. In 1971, she was older. Her hair was silver. Her hands were thin. And as she changed, the faces, they changed with her. It was a symphony of the macabre, a mirror made of stone. The village had become a circus. Thousands of tourists, thousands of flashbulbs. Pop, pop, pop. They wanted to see the house of the faces. They paid money. They stared. But they didn't see what Maria saw. They didn't hear the whispers at 4 a.m. The house wasn't a museum. It was a living thing. A parasite. Investigators returned, older now, wiser. They noticed something disturbing. The faces were no longer just static images. They were evolving. A face that looked like a young man in the 70s now looked like a withered old man in the 90s. The wrinkles on the concrete matched the wrinkles on Maria's face. It was as if the house was stealing her life, frame by frame, year by year. Is it a haunting? The journalists asked. Or is it a curse? Maria sat in her chair, looking at the floor. A new face had appeared near her feet. It was a woman. She was beautiful, but her eyes were empty holes, black pits of nothingness. Maria whispered to her. She treated the faces like family, like children who refused to leave the nest. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was tired. The energy required to keep the dead visible was draining her. She was the battery, and the battery was running low. Then, the mares appeared. These weren't just faces. They were full figures, small, ghostly shapes of people, walking across the walls. They appeared in the middle of the night, and by morning, they were gone, leaving only a faint, greasy residue on the plaster. The smell of ozone filled the kitchen. The air felt electrified, like a storm that never breaks. One night, a neighbor heard a scream. Not a human scream. A sound like metal grinding on bone. They rushed to Maria's door. They found her standing in the center of the kitchen. She was pointing at the floor. A new face had formed. It was massive. It took up half the room. It wasn't a person. It was a mask of pure terror. The mouth was opened so wide. It looked like a portal to hell. "They are coming for me," Maria whispered. Her voice was a dry rasp. "They are. Ready?" The scientists tried to intervene. They brought new equipment. They brought thermal cameras. They saw the heat. The floor was hot, 10 degrees warmer than the rest of the house, without a heater, without a fire. The energy was coming from deep within the earth, or deep within Maria. They tried to record the sound again. This time, they didn't get words. They got laughter, a low, bubbling, cruel laugh that vibrated in their teeth. The skeptics tried one last time to prove it was a fraud. They claimed Maria used silver nitrate or secret chemicals. They raided the house. They searched every cabinet, every drawer. They found nothing but bread and prayer books. No paint, no tools, just a woman and her ghosts. Maria's health began to fail. She spent more time in bed, away from the kitchen, and a strange thing happened. The faces, they began to fade. They became pale, ghostly versions of ghosts. The house was losing its power. The connection was breaking. But then, the end arrived. Maria Pereira, the woman who lived with the dead for 33 years, closed her eyes for the last time. The village went silent. The house felt empty. The battery was dead. Everyone thought the mystery was over. They thought the faces would vanish into the dust. They were wrong, because the faces of Belmez, they don't follow the rules of the living. And what happened next would haunt the village for another generation. Maria was gone. The house was cold. The kitchen was empty. The villagers stood outside, hats in their hands, whispering prayers. They thought the story was over. They thought the faces would crumble into dust, along with the woman who lived with them. The skeptics smiled. Now, they said, now the truth will come out. They expected the floor to turn back into just concrete. But the house had other plans. Days after the funeral, the doors were opened. The air inside felt thick. It smelled of old roses and ozone. The investigator stepped into the kitchen. They looked at the floor. They gasped. The faces weren't gone. They were brighter, as if a fresh fire had been lit behind the stone. But there was something different. The main face, the one that had watched Maria for 30 years, was fading. But in its place, a new shape was forming. It started as a faint outline, then a chin, then a nose. By the next morning, the village was in a state of shock. The new face on the floor looked exactly like Maria. The eyes were hers. The high cheekbones were hers. Even the sad, tired curve of her mouth. She had become part of the gallery. The woman who studied the ghosts had become the ghost herself. The House of the Faces was no longer just a haunting. It was a record, a stone diary of everyone who lived and died within its walls. The family tried to sell the house. No one would buy it. Who wants to sleep where the floor watches you dream? Who wants to cook where the walls scream in silence? The house remained a mystery, a jagged, uncomfortable splinter in the side of science. New researchers arrived in 2026. They brought AI. They brought ground-penetrating radar. They brought the latest technology. Some say the faces are a message, a warning from the past, a reminder that the earth remembers everything, every drop of blood, every secret buried, every tear shed. We walk on the graves of the forgotten. And sometimes, the forgotten want to be seen. Today, the house in Belmaze still stands. The windows are dark, the kitchen is quiet. But if you stand on that floor, and you look down, don't blink, because the faces are still there. They are waiting for a new soul. They are waiting for a new story. And as you turn to leave, you might feel a cold shiver down your spine. You might feel a hand that isn't there brush against your shoulder. You came to see the faces, but the faces, they have already seen you, and they've never forget a friend. The mystery remains unsolved. The nightmare remains open. Are you brave enough to look into the eyes of the ground? Or will you, like so many others, run before the floor starts to smile? The ocean is beautiful, blue, and peaceful. But look closer. Beneath those waves lies a world of silence, a world of bones. You think you're swimming in water. No, you are swimming in a graveyard that never ends. Deep in the crushing darkness, the currents move more than just sand. They move the forgotten, the missing, the victims. Thousands of years of human history, buried in the salt. Think about the ships that vanished, the planes that fell from the sky. Where did they go? They became part of the YS. The ocean does not judge. It does not speak. It only consumes. Every gallon of water you touch has touched the dead. It is a cocktail of salt and souls. Can you feel it? The cold grip of the deep? It is reaching for you. It wants to add you to its collection. The skeletons down there have no names. They have no peace. They just waiting for the next swimmer to come too close, waiting for someone to join the silent majority. You see, the land has graveyards, but the ocean is a graveyard, and it is much, much bigger than we imagine. Are you brave enough to dive in, or are you afraid of what might be waiting at the bottom? The surface of the water is a lie. It reflects the sun. It looks inviting, but it is nothing more than a shroud, a thin veil covering a kingdom of the damned. Imagine falling, just falling. Slowly, the light from above begins to fade. The blue turns to gray, then to a suffocating black. This is where the sunlight, DIES, this is where the pressure starts to crush your lungs. And this is exactly where THEY are waiting for you. Millions of people have been lost to these waters. Think about the ancient wars, the pirate raids, the massive storms that swallowed entire fleets whole. Thousands of men screaming as the cold salt water filled their throats. They didn't just disappear. They sank, they hit the floor, and they stayed there, in the deep. There is no decay like on land. The cold preserves the horror in some parts of the abyss. The bodies are still there. Tattered clothes, hollow eyes, frozen in a final moment of agony. They are the permanent residents of the silent world. But it's not just the past. Every single day, the ocean takes more. The missing, the murdered, the souls that the world forgot. The water hides the evidence. It washes away the crime. If the waves could talk, they would scream a billion names. Have you ever felt something brush against your leg while swimming? Something cold? Something bony? You tell yourself it was just seaweed. You tell yourself it was just a fish. But deep down, in that dark corner of your mind, you know the truth. The ocean is hungry. It has a stomach that can never be filled. Every wave that hits the shore is a reminder that the dead are just a few feet away. They are beneath your feet. They are surrounding your body. You are never alone in the water. You are surrounded by the ghosts of the abyss. They're watching from the shadows, where the light cannot reach. They're waiting for the tide to turn. And the tide is always turning. The pressure, it is the first thing you feel. At these depths, the water's no longer liquid. It feels like iron, 1,000 pounds of cold, dark weight pushing against your chest. Down here, There is a layer of the ocean floor called the marine snow. It looks peaceful, like white flakes falling in a winter forest. But look closer. It is not snow. It is the remains of the dead, tiny fragments of bone, skin, and scales, drifting down, down, down. A never-ending funeral procession that has lasted for millions of years. You are breathing it in. You are swimming through a soup of ancestors. Every breath the ocean takes is a breath of the departed. But there are things down here that the light never touched. Things that have never seen the sun. Giant, pale, eyeless predators that feed on what the surface discards. They don't just eat fish. They scavenge. They wait for the deliveries from above. Imagine a body hitting the floor. It doesn't stay whole for long. The scavengers of the deep. They have been waiting. They have been hungry. They strip the flesh in hours. They polish the bones until they are white as ivory. And then, the currents take over. They scatter the bones. One rib here, a skull there, a finger bone lost in the silt. The ocean doesn't just kill. It dismantles. It erases who you were. It turns a human being into a pile of calcium, lost in the infinite blue. Have you ever wondered why some parts of the ocean feel colder, like a sudden chill that cuts through your wetsuit? That is a ghost current, a pocket of water that hasn't seen the sun in 1,000 years. It carries the memory of a storm, the echo of a scream. When you feel that chill, do not ignore it. It is a warning. The abyss is acknowledging your presence. It is measuring you. It is calculating how much space you will take up on the floor, because in the deep, nothing is ever wasted. Not the meat, not the bone, and certainly not the soul. The silence down here is not empty. It is heavy. It is the sound of 1 billion voices, all trying to breathe at once, all trying to reach the surface. But they are tethered to the dark. And now, the dark is looking at you. The shoreline is a battlefield. Every grain of sand, every pebble, is a witness to a struggle. But the ocean always wins. It is the ultimate cleaner. It takes what it wants, and it never gives it back. Think about the John does, the Jane does, the thousands of people who walk out of their front doors and simply vanish. The police look in the woods. They look in the basements, but they rarely look deep. The ocean is the perfect accomplice. It hides the evidence. It destroys the DNA. It dissolves the truth in its acidic embrace. In the vast, cold emptiness, a body can stay hidden for a century. But sometimes, the ocean gets tired of its secrets. Sometimes, it vomits them back up. Have you heard of the beach of feet? Along the Pacific coast, shoes began washing ashore. Running shoes, hiking boots, sneakers, and inside those shoes, human feet, severed at the ankle, clean, bony, silent. The rest of the bodies, gone, taken by the currents, eaten by the scavengers. But the shoes, they floated. They became tiny rubber coffins, drifting for hundreds of miles, carrying a piece of a person who was once loved, who once had a name. Imagine being the one to find that shoe. Imagine looking inside. You aren't just looking at bone. You are looking at a crime that the water couldn't quite finish. The ocean is full of these half-finished stories. In the dark cracks of the continental shelf, there are thousands of skulls tucked away like discarded marbles. They roll with the tide. They clatter against the rocks in a rhythm that sounds like laughter. Do you hear that sound when the waves hit the pier? That hollow, rhythmic thump? Most people think it's just the wood hitting the water. But is it? Or is it something else? Something heavier? The abyss is a filing cabinet for the discarded. It holds the secrets of every killer who thought they got away with it. It holds the terror of every sailor who saw the mast snap. The water you're wading in right now, it has been inside a corpse. It has washed over a skeleton in the Mariana Trench. And now, it is touching your skin. It is cold. It is wet. And it is very, very low. The ocean remembers everything. And it is starting to remember you. Light cannot survive here. The further you go, the more the ocean feels like a wall of freezing, black pressure. This is the midnight zone, a place where the living are the intruders, and the dead are the kings. Think about the great disasters, the Titanic, the Lusitania, thousands of souls plunged into the abyss in a single moment of screaming terror. They didn't just die, they were preserved. The water at these depths is so cold, it stops the clock of decay. Imagine a cabin, 2 miles down. A door is still closed. Behind that door, a person is sitting in a chair. Their clothes are still intact. Their hair is still there, swaying in the faint, ghost-like current. They are waiting for a rescue that will never come. They have been waiting for over 100 years, but they are not alone. The ocean is full of these museums, of death submarines that crumpled like soda cans, trapping sailors in a tomb of steel. They died in the dark, listening to the sound of the hull groaning. Now, their bones are part of the machinery. They are the ghosts in the wires. And then, there are the lost ones, the people who walked into the waves because they had nowhere else to go. They didn't want to be found. They wanted to be erased. The ocean obliged. It took their names, their faces, and turned them into salt. Have you ever looked at the foam on the beach? That white, bubbling froth. Scientists call it sea foam, but think about what's in it. Organic matter, proteins, fats, all the things that make up a living body, broken down by the constant, violent crashing of the waves. The foam is the ghost of the flesh. It sticks to your skin. It gets in your hair. It is the literal essence of the fallen, being recycled by the tide. The sea doesn't just hold the dead, it breeds them. It creates a cycle where nothing is ever truly gone. It just changes shape, from a person, to a skeleton, to a grain of sand. Every time you build a sandcastle, you are building with the fragments of a billion. Every time you dig a hole in the beach, you are digging into a collective grave. The ground beneath you is shifting, the water around you is watching, and the abyss is getting hungry again. Can you hear the heartbeat of the deep? Or is that just the sound of your own fading pulse? The abyss is not just a place. It is an entity. It has a memory that spans eons, and it never forgets a face that sinks beneath its surface. Have you ever wondered about the bloop? That massive, low-frequency sound recorded deep in the Pacific? Scientists say it was an iceberg. But the sailors, the ones who live on the water, they know better. It sounded like a moe and a moan from a throat the size of a city. Perhaps it wasn't a monster. Perhaps it was the collective weight of 1 billion souls, shifting. Think about the burial at sea. For centuries, sailors have been sewn into hammocks with a heavy stone at their feet. They were dropped into the blue with a prayer. But prayers don't work in the crushing deep. The salt eats the words. The pressure silences the soul. Those hammocks, they don't stay intact. They tear. And out comes the cargo. A skeleton, still wearing a gold ring. A skull, still grinning at the darkness. They join the army of the unreclaimed. Imagine a mountain range, taller than the Alps. Now imagine it entirely underwater. This is the mid-ocean. RIDGE. It is the spine of the earth, and it is littered with the dead. In the cracks of the volcanic rock, bodies are wedged like broken dolls. The heat from the vents cooks the bone, turning it into stone. They are becoming part of the planet. They are the fossils of the future. But what about the ones who were put there on purpose? The concrete shoes, the victims of the mob, the people who saw something they shouldn't have. They are the hidden residents. They're the ones the ocean is paid to keep quiet. If you could drain the Atlantic, what would you see? You wouldn't see a desert. You would see a forest of bones, miles and miles of rib cages, pelvises, and jawbones. A landscape of calcium that stretches from New York to London. You would see the shackles of the slave ships. Thousands of men and women, still chained together in the dark. Their spirits are the ones that make the ocean roar during a storm. They are the ones pulling at the hulls of ships, trying to bring everyone else down to join them. The ocean is a bank. It collects interest in the form of lives. And the debt is never, ever, PED. Do you feel that tug on your ankles when the tide goes out? That's the undertow. But is it just water? Or is it a billion hands grabbing for the living? They want to show you the view from the bottom. They want you to see the lights, the strange glowing, bioluminescent lights that only appear when your eyes are wide with terror. The light is gone now. There is no day, and there is no night. There is only the eternal cold. This is the Hadal Zone, named after Hades, the king of the underworld, and it lives up to its name. At 7 miles down, the trenches are like open wounds in the earth's crust. This is where the heaviest secrets go to die. The pressure here is like having an elephant standing on every square inch of your body. Nothing should survive here. But things do. Have you seen the creatures that live in the trenches? They are translucent. They are pale. They look like nightmares made of glass. And what do they eat? They eat the fallout. They eat the remnants of the world above. They eat the remains of US. Think about the ghost ships. The Mary Celeste. The Carolading. Ships found drifting, perfectly intact, but with every single soul gone. No signs of a struggle. No blood, just empty. Where did the crews go? Did they jump? Were they pulled? The ocean doesn't leave a trail. It doesn't leave a suicide note. It just opens its mouth and swallows. Maybe they are still down there, walking on the floor of the trench, their lungs filled with salt, their eyes wide and milky. They are the walkers, forced to trek across the silt for eternity, looking for a way back to the air. But there is no way back. The ocean is a one-way street. Every time a tsunami hits, every time a hurricane levels a city, the ocean is reclaiming its territory. It is taking back the land. It is taking back the people. It is a slow, patient invasion. The water in your glass, it was once part of a tsunami that killed thousands. The water in your swimming pool, it has traveled through the ribcage of a shipwrecked sailor. Like, you cannot escape the reach of the Labiwisas. It is in the rain. It is in the mist. It is in the very air you breathe. The ocean is slowly, methodically, turning the entire world into a graveyard. And the worst part? We are helping it. Every ship we sink, every body we discard, every secret we bury in the deep. It only makes the ocean stronger. It makes the abyss heavier. The skeletons down there aren't just bones anymore. They are the foundation of the sea. They are the pillars of the deep. Can you hear that low, thrumming vibration? It's not the engines of a ship. It's the sound of a billion skeletons grinding against each other. A symphony of the lost. And they are playing a song just for you. The ocean is the ultimate hider, but every vault has a limit, and the limit has been reached. Think about the sheer volume of the dead. If every skeleton in the sea stood up at once, they would displace the water. They would flood the continents. They would take back the earth. The land is just a temporary island in a world of water, and the water is full of us. Every drop of the ocean has been through a human heart. It has been part of a tear, part of a bloodstain, part of a final, gasping breath. When you stand on the beach and look at the horizon, you aren't looking at nature. You're looking at a giant, blue mausoleum. The waves aren't just water hitting the sand. They are the fingers of the deep, reaching, grabbing, testing the shore. They are looking for the next piece of the puzzle. They are looking for the next body to be processed. You think you're safe because you're on dry land? Think again. The sea is rising. The graveyards on the coast are being eaten by the tide. The coffins are being pulled into the surf. The ocean is impatient. It doesn't want to wait for you to come to it. It is coming for you. The rain that falls on your face. It carries the molecules of the abyss. It carries the salt of 1,000 shipwrecks. You are being washed in the remains of the forgotten. There is a reason we fear the dark water. It is an instinct, A memory in our DNA. We know what's down there. We know that the floor is paved with skulls. We know that the silence is actually a scream that has been muffled by miles of pressure. Next time you go to the beach, look at the water. Don't look at the blue. Look at the black. Look at the space between the waves. Something is looking back. Something that has been waiting for 1 billion years. It has seen empires rise and fall. It has seen the first man drown. And it will see the last. The ocean doesn't have a heart. It has a vacuum, and that vacuum is pulling, pulling, pulling. Can you feel it? The weight in your chest? The cold in your bones? That is the abyss, claiming its property. You belong to the sea. We all do. We are just borrowing the air. And eventually, the ocean always collects its debt. Sleep well tonight. But remember, the tide is coming in, and it is bringing the ghosts with it. Welcome to the abyss.